Good evening, Cresswell, and welcome to the virtual City Council work session for September 28, 2020. I will open the meeting by excusing Councilor Drago. She is off enjoying a family birthday, I believe is what it is. So the rest of us, we will go ahead and call the roll, and I will call your name one by one and go ahead and respond with the present. Councilor Castilla.
Councilor Castilla here.
Councilor Inman.
Councilor Inman here.
Very good. Councilor Knutson.
Councilor Knutson here.
Councilor Prochu.
Councilor Prochu here.
Okay. Councilor McReynolds. Martha, are you there? Councilor McReynolds, one more time. Well, she was here a moment ago, so we'll just hope she drops in.
I think that's her. She's waiting in the lobby.
Oh.
Hello, Martha Jr. is here. Sorry.
Good. Thank you, Martha. Appreciate it. And Mayor Zetterval is here. So we have 6 in attendance tonight. So the first item on the agenda is a mayor's report. It's going to be pretty brief tonight. I have been extremely busy around the house and haven't had a lot of time to do it, so apologize for that. Basically, I just want to remind people of Cresswell that, you know, September is Preparedness Month. And I wrote an article in the Chronicle a couple of weeks ago, and if you have that copy, I would encourage you to reread that. It basically talks about, you know, what we can expect from the city in regards to a response to a major Cascadia earthquake. There is some good information that we have available on our city Facebook page. In fact, it's some really great information. There is also things available around town, and there was a good publication that came out just recently. I believe that was in the Chronicle as well. In regards to preparedness. So I just want to make sure that people are aware, and probably the one thing that people don't understand the most is that, you know, during a major Cascadia quake, the chances of having city services responded to failures in the services, whether it be water or sewer, phone, whatever, are going to be dramatically reduced. So it is a possibility that citizens will have to, you know, respond on their own resources and their own wherewithal for a week, possibly 2 weeks, who knows. We've heard from FEMA, and FEMA's even said that in case of a major earthquake, it could be a month or 2 until they're able to help out some of the smaller communities like Cresswell. So just keep that in the back of your mind, and do your research as far as what needs to be kept in your stores. Water, of course, is the most important. 1 gallon per person or per pet per day is what they ask for. And you know, I would suggest that you follow the mantra of FEMA and Oregon Emergency Management that to be 2 weeks ready, and that means 2 weeks of water supply as well. So that concludes the mayor's report. So we'll go ahead and go on to committee reports. First one would be the Public Safety Committee. Councilor Inman.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So the Public Safety Committee meeting was held on September 10th, 2020, 5:30. And the main focus of that meeting was the National Night Out. And that's a really shifted focus now to our other charge, which is the monthly safety message. Just with COVID and the fires, because that was September 10th that we met, the focus was on that. So that was kind of the switch of our meeting for that.
Okay.
And that was it.
Okay. I will echo something too, that my wife and I took a drive up the McKenzie Valley yesterday. You can't get very far up there, but you can get to Vida, which is surprising that it's even that far. And we have, I have 2 or 3 people that are either family or family friends that have homes up there blessing that one of them was survived, but the two others we were searching for were not. And they were literally leveled to ashes like you've seen on the news. And it is just so heart-wrenching and heartbreaking to see. You know, we talked to one property owner up there that lost everything as well. And it just, I can't even imagine. You try and put yourself in their position and what it's like. And it's just unreal, absolutely unreal. And, you know, we drove across a good pasture bridge. Thank God it was saved, and drove up one of those roads for a little ways, and gosh, it was home after home after home that was destroyed. And then all of a sudden, in a perimeter of, you know, fire destruction all around, and here's a beautiful home that survived somehow. And it just it's hard to understand. So in any case, we will continue with the committee report B, which is Transportation Public Works. Councilor Procedural.
Good evening, Mayor. I have what I would say is a partial report. The committee met on July 31st, and we had a pretty good discussion. And it was at that point in the conversation that we realized that there are some folks that and I think we knew this ahead of time, that we needed to have in the room, but we didn't feel comfortable continuing until we had them. And so that would be our city engineer and, of course, Mr. Piper, and also the two station owners, because as it relates to the gas tax, we thought that from the ARCO and the 76, John and Bill respectively needed to have that chance, because we had talked about that as a council. So we had shot for, and thank you, Councillor Knudsen, for reminding me, October 5th. But now I'm not quite sure, because I don't know that we've been able to reach those other folks. So that's tentative, and I need to follow up with Manager Hamburg and see, we might be rescheduling that.
Okay. All right, moves us on to the Airport Commission. Looks like it's Ms. Humble on the report.
Hi, Mayor and Council. Just a short update. We have not met since COVID. I am scheduling a meeting in October. And so we'll have a report at the next meeting, and Councillor Alonso Castilla can do that update then.
Okay, very good. Okay, Lane Act report, Councillor Inman / Maddie Phillips.
Hello, thank you. So the act met on September 9th of 2020, and some of the conversation was around the fire. So just how ODOT would respond with cleanup, and monies coming from federal emergency will be spent on the repairs. And at that point, projects were on hold. Another part of that conversation was that LTD was sending buses for evacuating of homes of people. And one of the other topics that has come up is the issue around the weaponization of vehicles, and just kind of that broader of security. This was more focused with groups of people or protesting. So that is a conversation I think that will come up again. And our next meeting is set for October 14th.
Okay, very good. Okay, item 3 is presentations. We have none tonight. So that leads us to our discussion item, which the only one we have on our discussion item is in regards to the equity ordinance. So since the packet went out, there have been a number of questions. So I'm going to try and go through the questions and my response as I understand things. So the Creswell City Council, where we stand with the equity and inclusion conversation, I'll do my best to clarify. So from the August 24th work session and from Roberta Tharp's comments, she states, I have re-listened to the meeting audio, and per verbatim, here is what the council gave unanimous consensus to. Mayor Zetterval asked for consensus to move forward with the resolution first, and then to talk further about this as far as the ordinance is concerned. So From my perspective of that conversation and that consensus, it was my understanding that the equity ordinance or equity commission would be moved to the September 28th council work session, which is tonight. So that was my understanding. So that leads us to the conversation in regards to the September 14th council meeting when we were discussing the equity resolution. These notes are taken directly from Roberta Tharp's draft minutes for that meeting, where it states, and this is talking about the actual motion that was made in regards to the equity resolution. Councillor McReynolds moved and Councillor Drago seconded the motion to table the resolution and the inclusion discussion at this time. Mayor Zetterball asked for further discussion. Councillor Prochu feels the hearts of the council are in the right place and they are doing the right thing. This is not the end of the discussion. Councillor Castilla noted that this discussion is not dead or going away and is going to pass. We just have to do more work on it. There being no further discussion, Mayor Zetterball conducted a roll call vote on the motion and the motion carries unanimously 7-0. So if you recall at that point in the discussion, I was quite upset and quite emotional. This conversation has been very much right dead in my heart and it's hard for me to deal with. So as such, I did not fully understand the full context of the implications of the motion that was made and was agreed to unanimously. Therefore, that is 100% my fault. So that being said, the tabling of the equity resolution now makes further discussion of the equity commission a moot point, which is the item we were going to be talking about tonight. So that's a moot point at this point. But there were members of council and the community that commented clearly, now is not the right time. So there are rules that council needs to hear and understand on how this can be brought back again in the future, if that is indeed what council wishes to do. And I will go through these based upon the book that we have, and I'll hold this up. I don't know if that shows there. This is the Mastering Council Meetings, a guidebook for elected officials and local governments, and we call it the Jurassic Parliament book. So this is something that is in our council rules that we are going to be using as a guide for conducting business meetings and how this is to be done. So, mayor's notes regarding tabling, taking from the table, and postpone to a definite time from the Jurassic Parliament. City Council has defined in our council rules that this book is to be used for all City Council meeting rules and procedures. So at this point, I would like it clearly stated that I will not be pushing for any specific action. I am doing my job to clearly lay out the procedures of the possible actions that could be taken as far as City Council, and will leave it up to City Council to make a fully informed decision based on the facts that I'm about to present. Just a moment. So I'm going to read things from the book that define and also lay out what tabling, to take from the table, and to postpone to a definite time. So, to definition of table, a motion enabling a body to put a motion aside while some other business is conducted. Often it can be misused by members wishing to kill a motion without voting on it. The correct motion for this purpose is to postpone indefinitely. To take from the table, so in other words, to take a tabled item and bring it back. A motion enabling a body to resume consideration of a motion that was previously tabled. So this part talks about the motion itself of what tabling a motion is. To table is not a debatable motion and takes a majority to pass, making it a dangerous motion because it is relatively easy to pass when members perhaps do not understand the consequences. Many people think that this is the way to get something out of the way. In other words, another way to kill it. Under Robert's Rules of Order, that would be wrong. and it is out of order to take that motion with the intent to kill it. Note, if a motion is not taken from the table, so in other words, this is the next step to bring that conversation back at some point during the same session, so in other words, during the same meeting, or at the next regularly scheduled business session, provided that the regular business session occurs within the quarterly interval or the next 3 months, then the motion dies. So what that means is if we do not return it to or take it from the table at our next scheduled business meeting, which is tonight, then the motion would die. So, definition of postpone to a definite time. A motion to stop considering the motion at a meeting underway and take it up at a future time or place at another meeting. So that is the definition of tabling, taking from the table, and postponing to a future time. So now I'm going to talk about where do we go from here. The actions that I'm about to read through are possible options that council can consider in regards to the topic of equity and inclusion. So where does city council go from here? And I'm going to read through some processes, and we can have a debate about it, and we can then discuss if what action, if any, council decides to move forward with. So does the language of the motion let me start that again. Does the language of the motion mean that the topic of equity and inclusion is dead? If so, does that mean that we need to take that? If so, that does not mean we need to take any further action tonight. Does it mean that city council wants to set it aside for now and bring the topic of equity and inclusion back in the future time? If that is the case, how does city council want to do it and want to bring that back? After hearing the result and consequences of what tabling is and what it does council wish to remove the item from the table, or does the equity and inclusion tonight? Or we can take them, and that can be done with a majority consensus to remove it from the table. To officially complete that action, however, it does require a majority vote of the city council at a regularly scheduled council meeting, which in this case would have to be October 12th, 2020 as our next regularly scheduled council meeting. If that process is not completed, then the equity and inclusion topic will die. If council completes the process to remove from the table at the October 12th council meeting, then a second motion could be made to postpone to a definite time, to set a reasonable amount of time in the future when the equity and inclusion topic can be brought back. As an example, after the new mayor and council are seated, or perhaps in 6 months, or perhaps in 9 months. During that period of time, council may also wish to hold town hall meetings, which has been widely voiced in our public comments that we received in our discussion about the equity resolution. So is there any questions about what I have read? Okay, so we will go ahead and have the conversation. So I guess if you understand all this correctly, I guess, so the first question is, where do we go from here? Does the language of the motion mean that the topic of equity and inclusion is dead? I will start there with that conversation, and I would like to have council express their views on these as we go forward.
Mayor Zettervall?
Go ahead, Councilor McReynolds. Councilor Knudsen.
Thank you. As the person that made the motion, when I said table it, I was not thinking in terms of any definite time, simply leaving it open for the near future. I'm happy to let it die simply because it's going to be a new team, and I'm not interested in burdening a future team. They can pick it up if they decide, and I hope they will. But I think saying a 6-month thing right now and asking the next team to honor that is a lot. Martha out.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Knudsen.
So when I voted to table it, I did not mean that it's dead. I wanted to keep on discussing it, and I thought that's what we were going to do in this work session and future work sessions until I got the agenda. Then I saw it wasn't on here. But I thought maybe we were going to still discuss it. I mean, it's only September. We still have 3 months to discuss this. And my opinion is if it dies when our terms end and new mayors and councilors come in and want to pick it up, they can. If it dies and they don't want to pick it up, that's their prerogative. So I want to keep fighting for this. I want to keep discussing it. I want to keep this going. I don't want to just sit on it. I still have 3 months of my term left. And this is important to me. And I think it's important to a lot of citizens. So I don't want to forget about it. And I don't want to stop discussing it.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Castillo or Prochu or Inman, your opinions? Anybody, please? Councillor Castillo.
Mayor, yes, Mayor. When I casted my vote, I did not believe that it was dead, and I would certainly be willing to pick this up in the 6 to 9 months, or probably more like 9. And the reason, and my reasons are that I really believe we need the support of the community on this. And also, we need time to allow for people to hear the example, the letter that we just received. We need that type of voice. It needs to be heard. And I do feel that it's important. And right now, from the consensus of the community, the people I have spoken with, there's just so much distraction right now. And I know that may sound like an excuse to some, but the fact remains that there is a lot of distraction right now, and it's hard to get behind this. So I think that maybe that's some sort of strategic point, to how to address this to get more support from the community. And I really like the idea of the town halls. And I guess I was misunderstood. I guess I misunderstood from the very beginning that I thought we were going to have town halls before we did the resolution, before we created the committee, because something like because this is a big item and it's very important to do something as big as this and important and say, this is what we've done. Now, community, what do you think? That's kind of why would you ask me something after a resolution's already passed, how I feel about it? So that would allow time for people to input. So that's how I feel about it.
Very well, thank you, sir. Councillor Prochu or Councillor Inman? Councillor Prochu.
Thank you. Kind of to echo the words that I heard Councillor Castillo said, it's kind of the chicken egg thing that we kind of deal with here. Do we do a thing and then try to bring about understanding and acceptance, or do we create trust and build understanding and then do the thing? I think we know that it's easier to, well, it's probably harder work actually to establish the trust and to build the consensus. But in the end, it gives us a better foundation for which the community can build on other things and do other things. So I really feel that the trust issue is important here. We heard some folks that felt that the commission might be big brotherish. They were concerned about the non-resident aspect of it. There were some that were concerned about, well, which two counselors are going to be on there, you know? So, and will there be a person of color on that commission? So we know that people have things to say about this and want to give input. So given that, I think that the work that the council can be doing between now and later, what that happens to be, is trying to figure out how we do that public input that is more meaningful than the ways that we've done it in the past, simply because obviously it's just not quite working here. We've had a couple of really hot topic issues. The gas tax is one of them, and this is another one, where people found out about it long after we had started talking about it. And so they feel disenfranchised when we do that. So I would say that if we were to move forward now, what would happen is that a large part of the folks out there that had written into us before would say, wait a second, you guys, you just tabled this and now you're talking about it again. You know, so I would really caution that we make sure that we build the trust and that we take the time to do it right. So that's kind of where I would leave it.
All right, thank you. Councilor Inman.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So I also too didn't realize when we had that conversation that tabling was what it is. My thought process was more to really hear Cresswellians and have those, whether town hall meetings, outreach, and gather more information, and then reevaluate and look at what we were presenting. So my thought process was more of an on hold, not a put it on hold later. So I think, you know, this could be an opportunity that if we were to move forward, like Councilor Knutson had said now, you know, could this be an opportunity to kind of put together a plan on what some next steps could be, not necessarily going for and just moving with writing the resolution, but kind of what is our plan? How are we going to get people involved? How are we going to get comments and really kind of see I think that would kind of lead the direction on how it's written in a way. And, you know, with a new council and a mayor next year, could it then be their decision if they wanted to move forward or not with it? So I just think right now could be an opportunity to kind of really gather things together and come up with a plan.
Okay, very good. Okay, so we do have Kaz here tonight, and Kaz and I have had the opportunity to meet about several days ago, and we talked about the next steps. And Kaz, I would like to have you join the conversation at this point, if you could, please. And I would like to have you talk about some of the things you and I talked about in regards to the town halls and, you know, trying to get the temperature of Cresswell's feelings on this issue.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councillors, for having me back. The first thing I want to say is that I think, although it was quite difficult to watch, the decision to take a pause was the correct one. A change like this cannot be imposed from above. It has to come from the grassroots. It has to have roots, deep roots in the community. And I had hoped that it would be an uncontroversial motion. Clearly, that wasn't the case. And that said, some of what I've read, I didn't actually watch the session, but what I read in the paper, and that chimes with some the previous work that I've done in this field. I think there are some pretty deep misconceptions at play here. Nobody is under attack. This is not about tearing people down. It's about lifting people up. And I think that right now, the discourse in this country is very muddied, and people are reacting through the sort of memification of our political debate. These are difficult ideas. They are complex ideas. And, you know, I've worked in this field for most of my career, 10, 15 years now. It's constantly changing, it's constantly evolving, and it's very, very difficult to keep up. I have to do a lot of work all the time to keep up with the latest developments. So somebody who doesn't do this for a living will find it hard to keep up. And so I think it is the duty of council, and as a resident of this town who has this expertise, I see it as my duty to help the people of Cresswell to get their heads around what the intent of the motion was and what the broader debate here is, because I cannot state this strongly enough, that this is not about tearing anyone down. It is not about any kind of pegging people back. It is about making sure that the values that are enshrined in the Constitution of the United States are lived up to fully. And some people might say, well, why do we need a resolution or a commission if we have a constitution? And the sad fact is that whilst the Constitution represents the best of who we are capable of being, we all know that there have been periods where we have failed to live up to that. And when we met Mr. Mayor, I used an analogy about blame and responsibility. And I know a lot of people felt attacked. And again, that is not the intent here. The analogy that I used was about the difference between blame and responsibility. And so I will share that with you, and then I will close out. Imagine you inherit a big house, big, beautiful old house, but it hasn't been maintained in the way that it needs to be. And the septic tank is busted. It's rusty, it's full, it's leaking. It needs to be torn out completely. That's not your fault. You didn't do that. You're not responsible. You know, you're not to blame for the fact that the septic tank is broken. But if you want to live in that house, it is your responsibility to fix it. And you're not just responsible to yourself, you're responsible to your neighbors, because as long as that septic tank is not fixed, it's stinking out the neighborhood and it's poisoning the water supply. So I want my fellow Cresswellians to understand that this is not about blaming anyone for the mistakes of the past. It is about recognizing those mistakes so that the future is better. And this is not something that I think can be done in a single council meeting, which is why I've offered to help facilitate some town hall meetings. And I'd be very happy to go into the details of those with council if council would like to hear more. But I will also offer myself personally, I will meet any person in this town at Holt Park, socially distanced, of course, 6 feet distant, wearing a mask, to discuss these issues. Because I firmly believe that Cresswellians are not just good people, but among some of the best. And we saw when the fires were happening, what happens when this community pulls together. And as I said, with the frankly poisonous discourse that we have at this point in time, that none of us created, we find it very, very difficult to come together as a community and speak to each other. I firmly believe that this is the right step, but I also firmly believe that it has to be a step that everyone takes together. And so I'm happy to talk to anybody in this town for as long as they want to. And if we walk away disagreeing, then so be it. But at the very least, it won't be because people didn't have the right information presented in the right ways. And that's it from me. So thank you very much for inviting me back, Council.
I would like you to talk a little bit about the town halls that you were proposing as well, as to how that would be facilitated and so forth as well, Kaz.
Of course. I mean, a lot of that is dependent on demand. And I've found in facilitating these things in the past that every environment, every audience is different. Now, I have done some in the city of Eugene that have been over Zoom. And that does have its advantages, but also some profound disadvantages. So one way of doing it would be a panel discussion. We delivered a series of discussions to the active Bethel citizens a few weeks ago. and that consisted of a 45-minute presentation on history. And that focuses particularly on the history of housing, because that's a very useful way of illustrating how it is that people of color have not been able to pass on generational wealth. And that in turn allows us to see how some of the hidden forms of exclusion and marginalization operate in our society that we don't always get to see the kind of bare bones of. And following that, a discussion, question and answer session, which again, I would be very, very happy to facilitate. The second meeting that we held was hearing from some folks of color about their experiences in Oregon. And that includes people that grew up in Oregon, as well as people that moved here from elsewhere. Councillor Greg Evans was one of those that attended, and Senator Manning as well as a prominent member of the local Latinx community, Alex Reyna, who runs a Facebook radio station. But I've spoken to a number of people who are people of color in Eugene and the surrounding area who've expressed an interest in sharing their experiences. And then the final session was, and that was the most difficult, it was about talking about some of the behaviors that people exhibit when they don't want to talk about race. Some of the, we call them deflections and detours. And it is something people don't realize that they are doing, because these behaviors are very deeply coded into us. And when I say us, I do mean us. Like, as a person of color who's grown up in a racist society, I am as guilty of many of these things, and I've had to work very, very hard to recognize that within myself. It is certainly true in the United States. It's true in the UK, where I was born, and it's also true for me in terms of my Indian heritage. The Indian caste system operates in a very similar way to racist structures. So I certainly do not exclude myself from these behaviors or from the need to better myself. And that is an ongoing process. It's a process that we all need to work on because our conditioning is very deep and sometimes we don't recognize it. So at the very least, I think we can hold 3 town halls of probably a couple of hours, and whether we choose to do them by Zoom or choose to do them in person really depends on the will of the community as council understands it. And I think that there are some profound advantages to holding them in person, but also we live in Oregon and we have to do this outdoors and it's October. So there are some profound disadvantages to being outside with pieces of paper at this time of year. And yeah, as I said, I'm also perfectly more than happy to meet anybody who wants to meet with me to have this as a discussion with 1 or 2 or 3 people.
All right, thank you, Cows. I really appreciate it. Councilors, do you have any questions for Cows? It looks like Councilor Prochu has a question.
Waving frantically here, yeah. I think I had the two of the 3 things that you mentioned. So the number 1 town hall was people of color passing on and talking about, oh no, wait a minute, that's different, I'm sorry. It was related to people of color and passing on generational wealth. I don't know if that was the first one.
Yeah, okay. So the first one is history. And that covers a bit of the history of Oregon. Councillor Procher, I think you've actually seen much of the presentation as part of your training in the city of Eugene. So it's essentially a presentation that, first of all, it lets people know things that maybe they might not, like, for example, the fact that there were Black pioneers. And there are still a couple of families in Eugene, the Mims and Reynolds families, who are descendants of those pioneers. So it's a slightly different understanding of history than perhaps the one that was passed down to us. And then there's a discussion of how institutional pressures on housing in particular, a lot of people don't realize that, really up until the 1960s and 70s, which in the life of a house is not a very long time ago, there were still racial covenants stating that anyone who bought the house was not entitled to sell it on to anyone who was not of the Caucasian race. And, we have examples in Eugene of that very fact from, I think the latest one we've been able to find was 1971 or 72. So these are histories that help us to understand how it is that we got to where we are today. And as I said at the previous work session, because Oregon has such a low population of people of color and especially of African Americans, and that is not by accident. There was a black exclusion law and sundown laws at the inception of the state. Because Oregon does not have very many people of color, people don't hear these different strands of history. I don't want to say different versions because none of them is more true or less true than the others. The pioneer story that my wife's family share with me is true, as is the story of the Reynolds family, as is the story of those who were forced to leave Oregon for various reasons, whether it was in the very early days or after Vanport was flooded and never rebuilt up in Portland. These are stories that people don't hear. And then if we dive straight into these discussions about equity, about race, about acknowledging the sins of the past, the failures of the past, and we don't know what those sins or failures are, people can sometimes react very badly. So I think the history piece is the most important aspect. Then hearing from people of color to see that, that sadly, a lot of these exclusions are alive and well. And then finally, it's about turning to doing some work within ourselves, recognizing these behaviors that we all have, and choosing to move forward as a community to be better than we were.
I think that was the missing piece for me. Number 3 is doing some work. So that's cool. And I had a question about number 2 as well, because you mentioned experiencing and hearing from other people of color in the community. And I know you mentioned that there are maybe some Eugene folks. Are there any ways that we could tap into maybe some Creswellians that I would, and I'm putting that question out there, not necessarily to solve tonight, but more just like, I think that would be kind of interesting. So thank you.
Yeah.
And we might need some assistance from city staff. Perhaps they might have some information about that. I'm not certain.
Yeah.
But
I don't know how you go about doing that without maybe even creating a problem. So I think you have to kind of tread a little bit carefully with that one. But somehow, I don't know. I just think it would be interesting. Because I hear from people that, oh, that's not happening here. So it's,
yeah.
but we know differently.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've expressed that, right, not long after I was voted as mayor, there was a conversation had with a couple people that I know that live nearby where I live, and African Americans, and they just decided that they couldn't take the abuse any longer and were leaving Cresswell. And it was difficult conversation to hear some of the things that they had experienced. And, so when people say it doesn't happen here is not true. The letter we received tonight from a citizen talking about that, and it was more in regards to sexual orientation, but it's still being mistreated and not feeling safe in his own little town. And, the fact that, he couldn't call Cresswell friendly, the friendly city, that's difficult to hear. But, and I don't know if somebody like that might be willing to join the conversation. I don't know. But these are questions that I think are ones that we need to wrestle with to try and get a feeling of people that, say that it doesn't happen here are mistaken, in my opinion. So, okay, any other questions for CAS Council? Councillor Knudsen, and then Councillor Castillo.
Thank you. So you mentioned a lot of Eugene and Oregon policies, and I think the dialogue that I've heard from Creswellians in their emails and letters is that those policies don't reflect Creswell, so they have nothing to do with Creswell. So why are we even discussing them? And I have my own opinions about that, but I would like to ask Kaz what he would say to that sort of dialogue, and how do we engage in that when somebody is being blatantly not wanting to even see the dialogue?
I mean, I think if you forgive me, I'm gonna get a little biblical. There is a parable we all know, the parable of the Good Samaritan. The Good Samaritan did not cause the problem that he solved. He was not responsible for an attack upon the roadside. And there were many others who passed by, who said, "That's not my problem. I didn't do that." And there was one person who did. One thing that I learned from a teacher of mine, I had a very high Anglican education. The school that I went to, on a scholarship, mind, was basically Hogwarts. We had our assemblies in Westminster Abbey, and I was actually an usher at Lady Diana's funeral. So I heard from the gentleman who was the vicar of Westminster Abbey that the point about the Good Samaritan was not just that he was good, but also that he was a Samaritan. And from the point of view of the Israelites, an outsider, a person who was lower, a person who was lesser. So the point of that parable is not just that a person crossed over to the other side, but that it was a person that the Israelites believed was lesser to them. So what I would say is that it is a problem everywhere, but even if you don't recognize it as being a problem in Cresswell, that to say we as a community do not stand for injustice, even if it's 10 miles down the road or 1,000 miles on the other side of the Rocky Mountains, that is a profound and important statement to make as a community. And then I would also say that the nature of this town, the nature of the countryside that surrounds it, has been shaped by those policies over long generations. I mentioned those families in Eugene. They were among the first, and forgive me, I don't recall all of the details, but they were pioneers. And they exhibited all of the characteristics that Oregonians are proud of: the self-reliance, the courage, the willingness to just keep going when others would have stopped. They came here to find a better life away from the exclusion that they'd experienced back east. And for a while they did okay, but as Oregon grew, they were displaced. They had their land taken away. And that happened not once, but several times. So yes, it may be the case that and we don't know, because we would need to look deeper into the history. We know that archives have been expunged and things have been hidden, because even the people that did those things found them shameful. But I think that as an area, the greater Eugene area, if you want to call it that, Lane County, that there are too many examples to say, oh, our little town didn't do this or isn't responsible for this. The fact is that we are all part of a larger system, and we can choose. Absolutely, it is our prerogative to choose to walk by on the other side, and it is the easier thing to do. But the better thing to do, the more courageous thing to do, even if we don't feel we were guilty of injustice, is to say we are not happy to see injustice.
Thank you. Richard, you're still muted.
Thank you. Councillor Castilla, you had a question, sir.
Castilla, you're muted.
Sorry, I thought I muted. More along, just a comment as to yes, it is probably dangerous waters to tread on people who have these stories and that are out there. And it is very important. And I'm hoping, my hope is that during this time and much conversation, that more and more of these stories will come out of our own citizens. And to me, I think that's going to be the turning point for others. They don't know what they don't know. So, like the letter that I read this afternoon, that goes a long ways, and I believe it will go a long ways for others. The others that I think they feel that we don't have a problem, that it does not exist here. And yes, no, we're not Eugene, we're not Portland, but we are Cresswell, and the problem does exist. And I think that these stories, which I really hope are going to come out, our own Crestwell testimonies, are going to make this issue turn around in a very positive way. And thank you, Kaz, for sharing all your knowledge with us. That's it.
All right. Thanks, Councillor Castillo. Councillor Inman or Councillor McReynolds, do you have a question for Kaz? All right.
Hi, Martha
Yes.
here.
Oh, go ahead. I'll go ahead and take Martha first.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Mayor Zetterval. I just want to thank you, Kaz, for coming and speaking with us. A lot of this is so sort of new to us that we don't have the language, and it's not a surprise to me that the first thing we need to address is language and what things mean, and have a process where we can own what we're saying around this as a community. How soon would we be able to have a public forum or a town hall? I'm out.
Are you busy this Saturday, Councillor?
Actually, I'm not busy at all.
In all seriousness, I would want to, whatever resources I created, I would want to create in close collaboration with council, but I think we could potentially turn something around in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and
I would be on board to help with that.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that, Martha. Thank you. And this is something that Kaz and I spoke with as well. And it's going to be, taking the temperature and find what we have in our community, people, who may offer some support, lend some, expertise and so forth. And then we can talk it over as far as the time frame. But yes, I would agree with Kaz that I would like to see something sooner than later. As Amy expressed, she and I have 3 months left in our term, and I would certainly like to see some motion moving forward if at all possible. And even if that's just town halls and then addressing it to the future. So, Councillor Inman, you would be next. Councillor Prochu, you'll be next after that.
Thank you, Mayor. So I just want to thank you as well for coming to tonight's meeting and the last one, and just your knowledge. And then, what I had mentioned about the plan and moving forward and facilitating town hall and doing some of these next steps. So thank you.
Okay, Councillor Prochu.
Make sure I'm not muted here. I was curious if, with regards to the town halls, it was actually more of a comment. I think that it's highly important that that if we're going to be doing this, that we as a council do everything that we can to, I don't want to say sell it, but just to make sure that people know that it's happening. I'm not in the business here to sell somebody on anything, but I'm definitely wanting to make sure that people have this opportunity and know about it. So I think those are some of the things that we might have to try to figure out too, that some of the work that we need to do.
Right. So one other thing we have to think about too, and that's regards to the state guidelines as far as COVID and being safe and all those regards. So, we'll have to do some work with staff as to, what possibilities we have. I know Kaz and I discussed about doing possible Zoom. I have not asked the question, but I don't know if the city has a Zoom license, which I assume would give more participants the availability to join in that conversation. Don't know if Microsoft Teams has the capacity to do that or not, but or is there a way that we can do it in an in-person format? Maybe at the school cafeteria, for example, and have tables set or chairs set 6 feet apart. We could facilitate. I would think we could be able to facilitate. Oh gosh, I don't know, probably 50 people at least. And do a panel discussion with the panel seated up at a table on the stage, that type of thing. So I think there are some opportunities that we have available to us that could work in an in-person format as long as everybody's practicing, good hygiene and wearing masks and 6 feet apart. I think we could facilitate something like that. And we have to also take the temperature of the community. I mean, if it's a point that the community doesn't feel safe in that regard, then okay, so what does that mean? We might have to put it off. I don't know. But there's quite a few things to talk about, and Kaz has laid out what I think is a really good plan, talking about the history of racism in Oregon as it's gone through the past. In doing that Oregon Mayor's Association presentation about racism in Oregon, it was a real eye-opener for me as a native Oregonian to understand the racist roots that Oregon has. It was really difficult to hear. So I think we have some things to talk about as far as how this might happen if this is the direction that council chooses to go. So, Kaz, I really appreciate it. If you want to hang on, maybe there'll be some more questions, but you've been an extremely big help tonight, and I so thank you for being here.
You're welcome, Mr. Mayor. I have to say the little guy's about to go to bed, so I always like to be able to put him down. Just one final thing that I'd like to say is thank you for continuing to pursue this process and for doing so in a manner that intends to bring the entire community along with you. I think that, the spirit that I saw around the wildfires, the community pulling together, is what Cresswell is as a community. And I believe that equipped with the right tools to be able to unpick a problem that in some ways, good people get used as human shields. People who are colorblind get used as human shields in the sense that they are used as cover by those that do have hatred in their hearts. And there is a very deliberate process of obscuring where these inequalities really lie. So the people who just want a quiet life, want to get on with their lives, who don't have a bad bone or a racist bone in their body, are a long way away from being able to see what's really going on. And so I just have to say again that this is not about blame. Racism is a sophisticated, long-lasting ideology, and it's only been able to persist because of its ability to hide in the shadows. Because of its ability to persist inside the hearts of some, and for those people to look others in the eye and say this isn't the case. So it is a difficult process to dismantle those exclusions, and I really appreciate Council and you, Mr. Mayor, your leadership on this in helping Cresswell to be the best of what it is and to express its best values. And with that, thanks again to Council, and I'm going to go and make sure the little guy gets down.
Give your son a hug for me, though, okay? Right. Thanks.
Again,
really appreciate it, sir. Good night. Okay, Council. So I guess the first conversation we had, and I'll go back to that question, is this topic dead? If your answer is yes or no, then we need to express that one first.
Mayor, can I interrupt?
Yes, you may.
Michelle, you actually had a motion that was approved that it is dead.
Mm-hmm.
So what I need from you is direction to staff whether or not to bring it to the next city council meeting for reconsideration. The only way a tabled matter can be reconsidered is that somebody at that meeting would have to make a motion who had approved the vote, who had been on the approving side of the tabling motion, to make a motion to bring it back. But right now, as it stands, you can't take any action on it right now.
Mm-hmm.
But you can direct staff to make a place for it on the agenda if that's what you want to have happen.
Okay, very good. So, councilors, hearing that, do we have consensus to direct staff to do that? I'll go with a round robin. Kevin, looks like Kevin had a thumbs up. Was that correct?
Not a thumbs up, or a question about what that really means, because when we talk about bringing it back, we're talking about the resolution, right? And I think, again, those murky waters, I think in my mind, the resolution wouldn't be the thing. It would be the discussion, broad discussion that we might be asking about, or so a little clarification on that would help.
Okay, so I can hopefully help. And if Michelle, go ahead, I'll let you answer first.
Yeah, it is only with regards to the approved motion. It has nothing to do with anything else. You can't move forward because you had an approved motion to table it. So you need someone who is on the approving side of that motion because the motion carried, and you want to, in effect, address that motion. You have to have someone on the approving side of that motion come forward to untable it. Mm-hmm. And in order for that to happen, it has to be advertised and all of that, which means that you have to let staff know that it needs to be on the next agenda. As to what you do after that, that's up to you. But as of right now, you all have agreed that this is a tabled item, which means it's essentially dead until you untable it.
The entire conversation, what I'm hearing.
You tabled the entire conversation. Yeah. Yep. You tabled the conversation regarding equity. So that's pretty broad.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Michelle.
So that goes back to what I was talking about too. It's to take from the table. Basically, it boils down to, so we would then be bringing that item that was tabled back to the table for further conversation, or for a direction to make a motion to postpone to a definite time. There's other things available to us that could happen. We could, so those are the conversations. But Michelle is absolutely correct. In the tabling of the motion right now, the whole conversation is dead. So to be able to have that conversation again, we have to remove it from the table to bring it back, and then another motion can be made, to table it, or not table it, but to postpone it for 6 months or 9 months, and then that gives us the time to possibly do town halls. That's just a possibility. So, Amy, you have a question?
May I?
Oh, just a moment, Martha. Amy had her hand up.
Okay, so from my understanding, in our work sessions, we cannot make any motions. We cannot make any sort of decisions. We only have to give a consensus as to what is going to be discussed at the next meeting. We've done this on numerous things. We discuss things at a work session and we say, we're not quite ready. Let's move it to the next work session. Or we say, yeah, we're ready. Let's go to the next meeting. But because this was tabled, that means it's going to die if we don't say, well, let's figure out what we're going to do at the next meeting. So somebody can, because all of us approve to table it, any one of us at the next council meeting can say, I move to discuss this in 6 months. I move to discuss this at the next work session. I move, whatever the motion is, we need to give staff some sort of consensus on what the next agenda item is. Is this correct, Michelle?
You just need, the only thing you can do, because as of right now it's done and you're not supposed to discuss it once it's done, is you are directing us to put a space on the city council agenda so that everyone gets notice. It's a notification sort of thing that the motion to table this item will be addressed. That's all we can say. Not going to say anything about how you're going to move forward or how you're going to address it or anything like that. All we can say is that this motion will be addressed.
Okay.
Okay. Martha, you'll be next.
Thank you, sir. I'm with Kevin in calling out, we really are at risk of appearing very disingenuous if we say, at the last meeting that we've tabled it, we're done, we don't want to poke at anyone, and right away we're planning the next poke. To me, the conversation is, can we have town hall meetings now under the aegis of the city where this discussion can go on and some growth can happen, and understanding built. And then we readdress the inclusion language and the possible team. But I think right now to start to say, no, let's bring it back and, bring it right back to life, seems a very difficult wobble to explain. I want to figure out how we can move forward with the town halls without addressing the adopting any new language or any formal statements other than we want to have some town halls. I know as individual citizens we have a right to call a town hall meeting. The town hall situation doesn't have to happen
Martha?
Locked in. Yeah.
Councillor McReynolds, you do not actually at this point have the right to call a town hall meeting on this topic because you as a council took a motion altogether unanimously to table it and to not discuss it further. So you cannot,
right,
unless you want to be in violation of the council rules, you cannot do that. The only thing that you can do right now is to tell staff that you want to address the motion that was made at that meeting and leave it at that. And then at the meeting, have this kind of a discussion. You shouldn't really even be discussing it now because you already took that motion and you're kind of skimming along the council rules right now. So
I appreciate your guidance.
As a matter of fact, you did tie your hands when you did that. So. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you. I respect what you're saying, and I completely agree. This isn't me putting out any pushback. I misspoke perhaps when I didn't state that as private citizens we have a right to. I remember Jane Vincent when we were having some public safety issues. She was wanting to move the topic forward, and council wasn't willing to. This is when we had the draft emergency preparedness plan, and she wanted to see what people thought. So she invoked her right to, I'm a person and I want to talk with other people. And she rented the community center and had a room full of humans there. There was no quorum. Other counselors didn't participate. And it wasn't booked as a city function. It was a topic that citizens were privately discussing.
With all due respect, Councillor McReynolds, because the City Council has taken a motion that was unanimously approved by the City Council, and the motion was approved and it's over, your council rules prohibit you as a councillor from taking, or a private citizen, from taking any action against what the council has ruled, because the decision body is the City Council, not the individual councillor. So if you want to go against the council rules and have censure and all of that, then I would say you can, but you would be in violation of the council rules.
Right. Okay, thank you. I appreciate the discussion, and I have no intention of violating any council rules or pushing my line of thought forward on any level. Thank you for your indulging me.
All right, so I've got 4 hands up facing me, and I will go in order. So that will be Councillor Prochu, then Knudsen, then Inman, and then Castilla. Councillor Prochu.
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, I believe Manager Amberg answered my question. It sounds to me like maybe the first hour of this meeting was a conversation we shouldn't have been having. So at least, I do appreciate at least understanding what our options are. That part I think is good, but I'm afraid that maybe we discussed them.
Councillor Knudsen.
So I am still not understanding the fact that the ordinance is a moot point, because they were 2 separate discussions. They were 2 separate, one's a resolution and one's an ordinance. Because they came together at the same time doesn't mean that they are the same thing. because we chose to table the equity resolution does not mean we chose to table the equity ordinance, which was on the agenda tonight to be discussed. So I'm still confused on why that is being tied into the whole equity conversation. It's not an equity conversation that's being tabled. The equity resolution was being tabled. The equity ordinance was supposed to come to this work session per our August work session.
So let me read to you the motion that was adopted. Councillor McReynolds moved, Councillor Drago seconded the motion to table the resolution and the inclusion discussion at this time. So to me, that means everything. Mayor or Manager Emberg?
I was going to say, because the inclusion discussion was included in the motion, it tables that as well.
Well, I will pay attention next time when somebody makes a motion that doesn't include everything that I choose to table, because that was a really roundabout way to table something that I did not intend to table. I fully thought that we were going to have a discussion about an equity ordinance regarding a commission this evening. And the fact that we are not is very disappointing, and I'm very confused, and I'm about done with this meeting. So are we moving forward or not? Can council answer that?
About the only thing we can ask at this point is, does council have consensus to bring the conversation back and direct staff to bring that back to council meeting on October 12th, sorry. So, Councillor Castillo, you had your hand up, sir?
Yes, sir. I too was under the understanding, because of the wording that Martha said, that this discussion was tabled. Now, after hearing what I've just heard of you going over the Parliament rules, and now that it is dead, technically, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And from what I just heard from Michelle, if we can't follow our own council rules, what type of example are we setting? This is a game changer in my mind now. I believe that we shouldn't be having this discussion, and that maybe we do leave it alone. Now, can we, but I'm still a little confused now. In next, what, March, it can't come, somebody can't bring this back? If we just leave it as per rules, is from what I'm hearing, and then 9 months from now, it can't come back. Michelle?
Well, there's also a ruling that says one council can't preclude a subsequent council from taking action. So the fact that you will have 3 brand new seats on council, plus a new mayor, provides sufficient changeover that new council could set its own timing on this issue if it so chose.
Okay, Councillor Inman?
Well, I think my question was answered, and at this point, I'm going to refrain from any other comments regarding this issue. But I also am in line with Councillor Knudsen of my understanding that that was with the resolution and not with the ordinance. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Prochu, I see you still have your hand up. Did you have a question? No. Councillor Castillo, your hand is still raised? Okay.
No, sorry, it wasn't.
Okay. Okay, and Councillor McReynolds, did you have any further question for Michelle?
No, sir, thank you.
Okay, so we have basically only one decision that we could make at this point, and that would have to be a consensus of do we have a consensus to move direct staff to bring this topic back for further discussion, or do we just let it die? So
I would like it back at the next meeting. I would like a formal motion on what we are discussing at the next meeting and how we are going to proceed going forward.
All right, that's one consensus. Anybody else, please?
I would say we let it die, from what I just heard. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead,
I
Palazzo.
would say we let it die, and is we're going to set ourselves up for a mess if we bring this right back. And like I said, we just heard the council rules, and if we can't follow our own rules,
That's within the rules, Alonzo. That's within the rules to bring this back to a formal motion at the next meeting. That's within our rules. Am I wrong on that?
Well, we shouldn't even be having this discussion. That's what
I'm sorry, could you let Michelle speak, please? Am I wrong on that?
No, you have it correct. That is exactly.
So that's what I am proposing. A consensus. That is my vote to go forward and bring this to a formal motion on how we proceed at the next council meeting.
We can't do a motion tonight.
No.
That's not a motion. I'm saying that's how I would like to proceed at the
Okay.
next council meeting,
Understood.
bringing a motion. Tonight is my consensus that this go forward to the next council meeting, bringing a motion.
That would be directing staff to put it on the agenda. So anybody else? Anybody else, please? We need to have a consensus decision at this point. So Councilor Castillo. Did you vote to have it die? Is that correct?
We can't
Yes,
hear
sir.
you. Oh,
Okay.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm sorry. I thought I'd already said.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I was understanding. Councilor Prochu.
Given everything that we've just discussed and realizing that we've also come pretty close, if not already violated our own rules, and given also that we have understood that the community input is an important piece, and that if we were to bring this forward again right now, this is going to be a huge hit for our trust and credibility on the council. So I would not support a motion moving forward right now, or
Okay. Councilor Inman.
So I did want to ask a question just to make sure that I have clarification and understanding. So if our next meeting, there was not a further discussion or a motion brought up. However, this was a conversation subject that wanted to be brought up later. What would be the time frame for that could have happened? And I guess that would be a Michelle question.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, the parliamentary, you all received a copy of Jurassic Parliament, and I would recommend that you read the section on tabling. When you first became a counselor, you each received a copy of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would read that section on it, but basically you have a quarter's worth of time, so you have 3 months from the time that the motion is made within the same quarter to take an action to reconsider the tabled item if you so choose.
Okay, thank you.
So I do need a decision on the request to bring it back to the next meeting or not.
Yes.
No. Oh, sorry.
So right now it's 2-3, and I vote yes to bring it back. So as our council rules state, that in the event of a tie, the motion fails. So that means that the motion is going to die tonight. So
There's no motion.
there's no motion. It's a consensus. It's a consensus to bring it to the next agenda.
I understand, but in the 3-3
But
consensus.
please don't use that term.
What?
We just can't use the term motion.
Okay, well, So am I misunderstanding it, Michelle, or not? If we do not give consensus, a majority consensus, then this dies. Is that correct?
Well, it doesn't work that way for work sessions because you're not actually taking a vote. It's not an action that you're actually taking, such as in a city council meeting. The tie rule is for votes in a city council meeting. However, with the council split like this, I think there needs to be some more discussion so that staff has clear direction on what to do.
But without consensus, we can't move forward on that, can we?
I know somebody needs to, without consensus, you can't move forward off of it tonight.
Right.
So, okay, so define consensus then. We've moved forward on things where we're like, yeah, let's move forward on that. And then the majority of the council says, no, I don't think we need to discuss this further. So what's consensus on a topic then?
I'm looking it up. Consensus, mode of discussion in which members seek to find common ground and agreement rather than having to vote.
We didn't find agreement.
Yeah, I don't sense you have common ground yet.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm willing to accept that.
So we end our meeting tonight split with our consensus. So I don't know that we can have any further conversation with it at this point, and I will be discussing this further with Michelle as to where we go from here. So with that, our meeting will be adjourned. Good night.